All right, little coaches speak from DeMeco Ryans at the owners' meetings. We know the number one story in the league right now. Where is Lamar Jackson going to go? Could he end up in the AFC South? Hell, could he end up with the Houston Texans? We'll talk about that and everything else in another edition of The Locker Room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 Central on Sports Radio 610. So the Texans have the number 2 overall pick. Will it be Bryce? Will it be CJ? Could it be Lamar Jackson? Props to friend of the show and the Houston Chronicles, Brooks Cabina, some of that fresh blood on the beat for asking DeMeco about this. When you go to these things, you want to localize it. You're a local beat reporter. You want to ask questions. You want to get guys on stuff that actually matters, the topical stuff. You have reporters from other teams coming to localize it. You should localize it as well and get the national perspective. And in this scrum that included a lot of media types, I think Peter King was in there. John McClain was in there. By the way, I anticipate a hell of a feature from Peter King in his column this next week, Football Morning in America, because he asked DeMeco a lot of questions and he got a lot of really good insights. So I don't know if it's going to be a feature, but I definitely think we're going to get some nice nugs from Peter King, who, by the way, got snitched out by John McClain. You'll hear that in a sec as well. But let's hear Brooks Cabina asking DeMeco Ryans about Lamar Jackson and the possibility of him coming to the Houston Texans. Here's your head coach weighing in on that possibility.
I don't think you would have seen this, but Lamar just tweeted just now about his stance for the team. It looks like he's requested a trade here. Is that a player that strikes interest? I mean, how do you go about looking at exploring veteran quarterbacks?
We look at all options for our team.
Yeah.
We look at all options for our team, so that falls into that category as well.
Coaches speak right there. Wouldn't expect anything different. Spoiler alert, the Texans aren't bringing in Lamar Jackson because it doesn't make sense and because they have a top 2 pick. They're deciding between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, and it makes more sense to go in that direction. But from the Indianapolis Colts point of view, and I talked about this today on the show, the risks of Lamar Jackson are clear. And we understand the durability concerns. We wonder how the game is going to age. But a guy that's 43-15 as a starter, an MVP, and is still a very, very good quarterback in the NFL, no matter how you feel, there is risk. But can you make a case that when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts, it's actually a safer play than the alternative? If the Indianapolis Colts had the number 2 pick in the draft, they're probably not in on Lamar Jackson. They're in on CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. And they're probably feeling pretty good about themselves, just like the Texans are. However, with where they are in the draft right now at 4, they're in a position where they're either going to do what they've been doing for over a decade and go with a veteran option in Gardner Minshew with a limited ceiling, or they're going to bet on Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. Which is riskier? Is it more risky to pay Lamar Jackson what you're going to pay him and give up a couple of first-round picks? Or is it more risky to cross your fingers that Will Levis and Anthony Richardson become franchise quarterbacks and invest the number 4 overall pick in them? Which one do you think has more likelihood of working out? Especially when you've been playing the game that they've been playing since Andrew Luck retired. You can make a case that it's more safe for them to take on all the risks that come with Lamar Jackson. And I'm a Lamar Jackson guy, but there are risks. Rather than cross your fingers and hope Shane Steichen can get something out of Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. Now, you can make a case that from an Anthony Richardson standpoint, Indianapolis would be an ideal situation, but you can also say, well, we talk about this unrealized potential. It's not going to get unlocked no matter what. I know that Joel Klatt has compared Anthony Richardson and unlocking his potential to a Rubik's Cube. It might just be a puzzle that can't be solved. So you can make a case that from Indianapolis's point of view, number 1, if they had the number 2 pick, they're not having this conversation. Hell, if the Texans had the number 4, maybe we're sitting here talking about Lamar Jackson instead of the other guys. I actually think we're just talking about them not taking a quarterback and continuing to go. But I don't think the Colts are in a rebuild situation right now. Texans kind of are. There's a little bit of patience. So if they had number 4, maybe we're looking at quarterbacks next year, and we're talking about Will Anderson, Jalen Carter trading down, something like that. That's not where Indianapolis is with that roster. They got to get something out of those vets. They got not an aging roster, but the guys are a little bit older. And do you really think that you can unlock Anthony Richardson and Will Levis? I say no. Maybe this is a clip that you pull 3 years from now and it looks stupid like people did with Josh Allen. I say no. I think Indianapolis is kind of leaning in that direction as well. And that's why they're the betting favorite right now for Lamar Jackson's services. Other news from the owners' meetings, Brooks Cabina once again asking the good questions. He wasn't throwing them away. He didn't waste any jet fuel to go up there and talk about stuff that no one cares about. He was asking the right questions. Here's Brooks Cabina asking DeMeco Ryans what his thoughts were. Remember that Friday when Carolina traded up for the number 1 pick?
My reaction was, hey, they're making a move to go get their guy. Well, that's the reaction I had.
How does that change maybe the internal conversations? Knowing everything we just said earlier about quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Now a team who needs a quarterback just jump to.
It was something that we can't control. We already had Chicago in front of us. We couldn't control. We're still at 2. At the end of the day, we have to pick where we are, and we'll make the best pick for our organization when that time comes. So we don't worry about things that are outside of our control. We can't control what the Panthers are doing. We can't control who they'll pick. And we're not concerning ourselves. We're not losing sleep over what the Panthers will do with the number 1.
There's that DeMeco coaches speak. Gotta love it. Nothing you can really do at this point. Brooks naturally asked the question, well, what about jumping up to number 1? There's been reports. We'll get to those in a second. McClain kind of snitching. But here is Brooks Cabina asking DeMeco about potentially hopping up to number 1. And as expected, he gave you some what? Coaches speak.
After your visits with these guys, you might urge to go for the 1 pick. Might urge Nick Austin to move up.
That's some stuff we won't discuss right now.
All right, there you go. So you would not discuss it now. We all remember those reports from Peter King that Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, was interested in potentially trading with the Texans, and that the conversations went to a certain point, which was interesting. And it was one of those reports where specific names were brought up. Peter King put his face to it. He put Ryan Poles' face to it. And Peter King, who was on a different assignment, and we've kind of moved past this. This is funny. So Peter King is getting like some depth from DeMeco Ryans. He's in the scrum. He's still going to ask a couple more questions. But this comes up. It's obviously a different point of view. And his buddy John McClain snitches on him. Flat out snitched on him as Peter King's sitting there. DeMeco kind of just jumped through it. But you just heard Brooks ask about the trade up. Listen to old snitching McClain out there in Arizona.
Well, that's things that internally that we discussed that it's not a factor right now.
Ryan Poles told Peter King to talk to y'all. Is that right, Peter?
Ain't that right, Peter? Ain't that right, Peter?
Well, that's things that internally that we discussed that it's not a factor right now.
Ryan Poles told Peter King to talk to y'all. Is that right, Peter?
Ain't that right, Peter? Guy's just trying to move on. It's not really even relevant at this point. And McClain's sitting there dry snitching, and DeMeco just jumps in stride. Keeps going. I am looking forward to what is said by Peter King. We know you can have some fun with Peter, but he's one of the best writers of our lifetime, especially when it comes to America's game. And he was not asking those questions without a purpose. And DeMeco, quite frankly, probably gave him about 7 minutes of audio with some really good stuff on when he thought that he was going to become a head coach and all that. Real in-depth stories that I thought was great. But props to all the guys over there asking the questions. Props to Brooks for getting in there and asking the questions. The localized angle is what matters, especially here and especially around here. But we got a lot of coaches speak from DeMeco Ryans. You can chalk Lamar Jackson off your wish list. You're basically wasting time at this point. And quite frankly, if Indianapolis had the number 2 pick, they wouldn't be entertaining it as well. It's kind of in some no man's land. So that was DeMeco Ryans live from the owners' meetings. We'll hear more from him throughout the week. Tomorrow, we'll hear from Cal McNair. You'll hear that right here and on In the Loop on Sports Radio 610 on the Odyssey app. Have a good one. And remember, no matter what happens when it comes to the Texans, whether McClain is snitching or not, we're all in this